Hey, Bashi.
Hey, Sufi.
Somebody's getting married in 5 days.
I know.
It's you.
I know. I'm well aware.
You're well aware. How are you feeling?
I'm excited. I just hope that it's a lot of work putting a wedding together, and I just hope it goes off without a hitch.
Axel, who's 6, your nephew.
Yeah, I know him.
He wanted me to ask. He wants to know if he can bring 2 friends.
He wants a +2?
I know it's late in the game, but can he get a +2?
Are they both real or either of them imaginary?
No, they're both real, and they both have severe dietary restrictions. Dad's really thrown down the gauntlet, FYI. I think he wrote his speech. We're both talking at your wedding. I think he wrote his over the course of the months.
He's been working on it because I'll get these little texts that are clearly speech-based where he wants bits of information or clarifications on some things, and I really appreciate it. I mean, it shows that he is putting in the work.
Again, I wish my father-in-law, Tom, had done that because at our wedding, he famously got up and had maybe put no thought into his toast.
Yeah, he had some wrong and some bad info.
He immediately said, I'll never forget when we all went to Madrid and Alexi heckled her dad and said, I've never been to Madrid.
Well,
and he was like,
she wasn't wrong.
Haven't? Yeah, no, he was. Oh, she wasn't wrong. That was def a Tom fumble. But so Dad, I think, is real because again, he famously had a great, great toast at my wedding, but then you sort of dropped the mic.
Yeah.
It was like how Anthony Mackie also, had a really good rap in 8 Mile. People don't forget that.
Yeah.
It was a good rap. And then
excellent
Eminem
rap.
And then nobody remembers Anthony Mackie's rap because Eminem's rap. And this is how people talk about raps. His rap was the best rap. And then the famous line, which I'm sure I've said on this podcast, which is somebody came up to Dad and said, oh my God, Josh's toast made me cry. And he said, how do you think I feel? Before he gave it, I was the best toast you'd ever heard.
Yeah. Well, he's got another bite at the apple.
He's got another bite of the apple, and I feel like I think he's trying to get in my head because he's a lot of like, how's yours coming? And I'm like, stop trying to rattle me.
We did a live premiere of an episode of Family Trips, which is it comes on YouTube live 7 a.m. Pacific, 8 a.m. Eastern on Tuesday, and
7 a.m. Pacific and 8 a.m. Eastern are 2 different times.
Didn't I say 10 Eastern?
Yeah. I thought you said 8.
Yeah,
I don't want to. I just don't want. I feel like if Mackenzie hears this, she might call off the wedding. If she doesn't think you understand time zones. Anyway, keep going.
But it was really fun. It was sort of live chat. I was on. There was some debate among our listeners as to what they wanted to be known as. There was Trippies was mentioned. Okay. Trippers, Tripsters.
I think Trippers would be my pick. Do you have a pick among those 3?
Well, I felt like I don't even know what to call it. I don't want to sort of put my finger on the scale, but there seemed to be a lot of support for Tripsters. Trippers might imply sort of a use of illicit substances.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
And Frippers, what would Frippers, if you heard Frippers, what would you think just happened?
Well, that something happened to Mom.
Something befell Mom.
Yeah.
And it would be a sort of I don't know, sort of vague injury where she would say she got frippered.
Fripper comes from she had a fingernail get like broken or bent back, and she said, my nail got frippered. And now frippered sort of stands in for anything that might befall you.
It's not quite, it's a lot of like, I think she lives her life, pretty much every anecdote she tells us is about how she almost got frippered.
Yeah.
She's not getting frippered as much as her usage would leave you to believe. But anyway, all right, so Tripsters?
Maybe. I feel like...
we'll leave it. We'll keep it in the hopper and keep working on it.
Yeah.
This is there's a big movie coming out. It's out. This conversation happened before it came out. With it's Megalopolis. It's directed by Francis Ford Coppola. It has an amazing cast. Giancarlo Esposito, which I did not know is how you said his last name, and we established in the podcast that it is.
Yeah, a lot of people would be saying Esposito. Esposito.
Esposito. And he's got an incredible story, an incredible background.
An incredible just gentleman.
He's a gentleman.
Yeah.
He really is. And I think I hope this won't bother you. I think a lot of my best man toast is going to be about him now.
Well, he's a good man. So
he's a good man.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Well, I'm very excited for all of you to hear that. But you know what? Even as excited as I am for everybody to listen to the pod, I'm more excited about 5 days from now. All right. But first, Jeff Tweedy.
Family trips with the Myers brothers. Family trips with the Myers brothers. Here we go.
Yes.
Hello.
Hey,
There he is.
How are you?
Good. It's so nice to see you again.
You look so
Nice to
classic. You
look so
you're
classic.
a classic gentleman, and then with your backdrop, it's just even more classical.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah.
Look at your fresh faces today. Wow, awesome.
We do what we can.
We are
well.
going to get in to your upbringing, and Josh is very loath when I use this podcast to talk about our guests' work, but I just want to get out of the way. You have done some of my favorite things. You've been in some of my favorite television shows, and I'm very, very happy every time I'm lucky enough to see you.
Oh, thank you so much. I love what I do, and I start with that always. I've been blessed to have worked with some great folks, and what I do is mostly a collaboration. And if you have great writing and great words, and you can sort of fill in between the lines with some character stuff, it works. And when it works, it's a beautiful thing.
One of my favorite shows, which is streaming again on Peacock, is Homicide: Life on the Streets. And you showed up for the final season of that. And then I realized your upbringing is kind of a little bit like Yaphet Kotto's character, Al Giardello, because you are half Italian.
I certainly am. And in my conversations to get into that show, I remember really wanting to expound on the background that I have to make it more natural. And I would look at Yaphet and go, oh my gosh, this guy is really African royalty. And
yes.
What part of that looks Italian? But we you know what I mean? But Tom Fontana and I had long conversations about wanting to get some of that Italianism into the show. And I was really honored to come in a year where Andre Braugher was leaving and take over that storyline in a new way in a relationship as Mike Giardello to Yaphet's, very stern captain and fatherly attitude.
I also think of you as, I guess I always associate you as a New Yorker, especially I think because maybe the first time I laid eyes on you was in Do the Right Thing, but you were not born in New York. I think no one will guess where you were born. Lay it on us.
Yeah, Copenhagen, Denmark is where I was born, which is really, out of form for me being the Italian who was born in Copenhagen to a mother who was from Alabama, who became an opera singer, went to Europe, met my father at Alla Scala in Milan and also in San Carlo Opera in Naples. And she was performing with Josephine Baker. And,
wow.
and when I was born, and she was... she had my brother in Rome and was maybe 6 months pregnant with me and had these large hoop dresses made to hide her belly. And she was doing a supper club act at that time. So I have that, that part of me that is multicultural in every sense of the word.
Was your mother performing like right up until your birth or a couple weeks before? Or?
She was until she describes it to me. She described it to me that she had a country doctor who didn't monitor, did natural things and didn't really monitor her weight. So my birth was difficult for her because I was born 13 pounds.
Wow.
And so, yeah, so I think I tortured her a bit in my coming into the world. But I love that I have this background to speak of because it's had me look at the world through a different lens. Raised in a household with a mom and dad who listened to operatic music, who that was their life, was the creative arts. My father was a stage technician and lighting man and fly man. He did everything backstage in a small opera house in Naples, Italy, which was San Carlo. And I recently went back there. I went back there last year. I took 3 of my 4 daughters. We met the 4th in Portugal for her engagement. But we went to Naples and I went to that opera house and I stood in that opera house and just cried tears because all of my familial history came back to me.
Now, two things I want to say. One, I feel like they should have written an opera for your mom about someone giving birth to a 13-pound baby because I feel like those would be really fun notes to hit. When you go back, I say this, my children obviously are younger. Mine are 8, 6, and 3. But when you went and had an emotional moment in the opera house in Naples, were your children also emotional, or were they the kind that I have that make fun of their dad when he gets choked up?
They saw that I was very moved. It was a strange situation. The opera house closes during a lunch period because, in Italy, they take very long lunches. And so they went there was someone in the box office who was explaining as soon as he said they were closed until 3, I just took off. So they watched me go one way and they were talking to this gentleman, what's he doing? What's he doing? And my kids call me extra anyway. And so I just went right up the corridor, right into the opera house and stood there and was frozen by the red draperies, by the red seats, by the size of it. It was intimate, by the visions that were coming to me that I had never seen, but I'm making the imaginary visions of my mother on stage and my father back, and the curtains were partially up so I could see the backstage, and tears are coming to my eyes, and then a man taps me on the shoulder and says, no. You have to leave. No. So, and so I came out and they saw I was visibly moved, so they didn't make fun of me, which was nice.
That's very nice. So your parents never then, when you were young with your siblings, they never took you on a trip back to Naples to show you where they met?
They never did. I did do one trip to Italy with my father, which was a lifelong yearning for me to do with him. And I went back with him in the early 90s. And he was a very complicated man, my dad. And so I kept having the feeling that he didn't really want to go back to Italy. He would go back every year when I was young, which ceased after I was 13 or 14 years old. He didn't go back anymore. And so he was a bit curmudgeon-y on that trip, but I was able to go to Rome with him. And it was a bit of a bittersweet trip. We went to Rome, we went to Pisa, we went to Assisi, because I was a very spiritual, religious kid who was an altar boy. And my father had become basically an agnostic. So, it was a strange moment to go to the Vatican and him not want to come in. No, Giancarlo, I don't want to go in. So what do you mean you don't want to go in? I don't want to go in. I said, well, why wouldn't you want to? No, it's not for me. It's not for me. You go. And so the whole trip was about me bonding with him, and he doesn't want to go in. But he knows all the history about the Roman guard and the Swiss guards who guard the Pope and all this. Sure. So he's giving me all this history and drawing me in. And so I went in and walked around by myself and came back and met him outside. And he's feeding the birds with some, bird seed or whatever it is out in the courtyard, which is really beautiful with fountains and all that. So it was a really interesting trip for me because I realized he was put off a little bit about going back to where he started.
What do you think it was about it? That it was just that you can't go back, or that the past is the past?
I think it were his memories of going to Rome from Naples. Now, I started to figure it out when I went to Napoli. Napoli is very different. It's a very edgy town, great food, great theater, great people, but tougher and rougher. And he left there at a young age to go to Rome and become an artiste, right? After all, if you're working in the opera and theater, you're an artist. And so I had the same experience, going into the galleries in Rome, because he, as a boy, it didn't cost anything. And so, we wanted to go into the Medici castle, which is beautiful. And no, Giancarlo, it's too much. I said, what do you mean it's too much? Giancarlo says, no, this is ridiculous. It's too much. And I said, Papa, I'm paying for it. No, you don't pay for me. And so it happened again at the Medici castle. And I thought, oh my gosh, what's going on with him? But I let him go through his journey and his moment, went in, looked at the David, looked at this and looked at that, came out. And then we proceeded on. Assisi was beautiful because there was a lot of time outside. But he was really shied away from the religious connection to Rome and the Pope and all that. And I have a feeling that it was because of his childhood upbringing. Those memories that come back that you haven't never looked at or faced. To me, it was just marvelous to see the art and to spend some time with him.
Did he spend the rest of his life in New York?
He did. He spent the rest of his life in New York. He worked in the New York theater, most of his life until close to the end. Then he went to Florida. So Florida to me is the last stop. In a way, he went to Florida
for a lot of people.
Key. Yeah, for a lot of people. What is that about? He started an opera company. It's weird, right?
He went and started an opera company there?
He started the Opera Buffa company. Opera Buffa meaning short opera. Because he felt like Americans couldn't appreciate 2 and 3 hour operas, and he would shorten them. And he tried to start a company, which, it didn't really take off. But it was a great idea, I think.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people, certainly I think most people don't go to Florida in their final days to try to start a short opera company. So I applaud him.
Absolutely. I looked up to him for doing that. I truly did. And he almost had all that come to fruition. He did a few performances and it kind of worked. But then he started to fall into ill health and he took off on us.
What about how did your mother find her way from Alabama to Europe?
My mom was performing at a great place in Cleveland, Ohio called Caramoo House, which was a training ground for young actors, writers, dancers, and musicians. And she won the Marian Anderson Scholarship. Marian Anderson was the first officially successful African-American opera singer. And she left a scholarship fund. And my mother won that scholarship, which allowed her to come to New York to a place called International House, which was on Riverside Drive near Grant's Tomb, up at 123rd, 124th Street, where she continued her studies and then had an audition for a show, a State Department tour, which they were doing in the 50s to bring American culture to Europe. And she won the audition of playing alternating Bess in a show called Porgy and Bess by George and Ira Gershwin. And Leontine Price was the other Bess. So they alternated on a State Department tour, which was about a 4-year period in Europe. And that's what brought her to Europe. And that's how she met my father and fell in love and had her mother come over from Alabama while they got married and started this very romantic, great love affair of 2 people, one on stage and one behind the scenes in their partnership in the creative arts.
Wow. What a thing. And then was Copenhagen when you were born in Copenhagen, were they there for a long time?
They were there, I remember, for a little over a year. My brother was born in Rome. There was a hospital on the hill where Nero fiddled while Rome burned. So my parents, my brother eventually became a violinist for many years.
Oh my goodness.
So my parents had this romantic view of the world. And she then went to Copenhagen to open up for Josephine Baker. And so there was this connection to Josephine. They became friends. And so we lived in Denmark. And I have some photos of me in Denmark, one sitting on a nun's lap and one with my godmother. Her name was Addie, blonde and blue-eyed. And they loved the feeling in Denmark. I think in Rome at that time, they experienced some experiences had them feel like they didn't belong in a way, because it was, although Italy has a history of welcoming soldiers after the war and interracial marriages, it was something that was kind of acceptable in some places and other places not. And so I had a feeling that they were really comfortable in Denmark. And so I'm reminded through some photos that I've looked back at that that it was a happy time for them there. So it was about a year before they moved on to Hamburg. My mother performed at the Hamburg Staatsopera, and then, of course, back to Rome, toured around Europe for a little bit before coming back to America.
I do just want to say real quick that I have a 3-year-old daughter who is a blonde, blue-eyed Addie. So we'll come full circle. She's Adelaide.
I love it. I love it. It's a beautiful name, Adelaide. Truly is.
It was our grandmother's name as well, so it is it's inherited.
Hey, we're going to take a quick break and hear from some of our sponsors.
Family Trips is supported by Airbnb. Hey, Bashi.
Yeah, Sufi.
You know we have an annual trip.
Yeah, we sure do. We get a couple regular trips, but which trip are you talking about?
I'm talking about the fact that you and I and 10 of our closest college friends get together every September for our fantasy football draft.
Such a good trip.
Very little of the trip is about a fantasy football draft.
Yeah. I always feel a little nerdy saying that we're going on a fantasy football draft, but we're going to hang out with our buddies.
Yeah, that's why I say it's a fantasy friendship draft. Would that make it less nerdy, or is that maybe worse?
No, I think it's charming. It's sweet.
So this year for our fantasy friendship draft, we have a fantasy location booked. And it's all thanks to Airbnb. We found a place that has enough space for all of us and enough bedrooms for all of us and has a lot of outdoor activities, a fire pit. There's a fire pit, Pachi.
There's a fire pit. I want to say there's a volleyball court.
Yep.
There's a pickleball court. There's a lot.
It's driving distance to a hospital that a bunch of 50-year-old guys are going to have to go to when we blow our ACLs.
Yeah.
But in general, it is so nice that it has all the things that we could not get with our group at a hotel.
Oh, absolutely not. Because what you want is you want to be able to hang out together for as long as you can, and then if it's time to go to bed, you go to bed, but everyone else is sort of in the same place. And one thing that we're sort of focused on trips like this is no new friends.
No new friends. We don't want to meet them. We don't want to make them. We're happy with who we are. And maybe you're someone who's thinking, you know what? My home could be a great get-together for old friends who are not looking to meet new people. You've put a lot of time, effort, and work into your home, and someone out there would probably love to experience it while they're traveling, and then they would rave about how it was the highlight of their trip. Your home might be worth more than you think. Find out how much at airbnb.com/host. Support for family trips comes from Everyday Dose. Hey, Bashi.
Yes, Ufi.
Say hello, not just to me, but to the next generation of coffee. Everyday Dose combines delicious coffee with functional mushrooms, nootropics, collagen, protein for boosted focus, clarity, energy, sleep, and immunity.
Wouldn't it be nice to be able to feel that better?
Excuse me, I said say hello to it.
Oh, hello, Everyday
right,
Dose.
Go
Wouldn't it be nice to sort of feel a lot clearer, a lot more awake, a lot more with it, other than drinking just like a ton of coffee?
And I drink too much coffee, Posh. I felt like you were directing that to me.
Mm-hmm.
And now, with Everyday Dose, I'm getting more important stuff than just caffeine. I'm getting collagen protein, helps maintain my skin elasticity, volume, and moisture. Also helps make up proteins such as keratin that forms skin, hair, nails, makes them stronger. My nails are so strong right now.
Yeah, and your skin is so elastic.
It's so elastic. Lion's mane. It's not an actual mane of a lion, Posh.
No.
You know what lion's mane is.
It's a mushroom, and it can help
Yeah.
to improve your cognitive function, including memory, focus, creativity, productivity, mental clarity, and concentration.
And most importantly, it tastes like a delicious cup of coffee with half the caffeine of a regular cup, so you won't get any of the jitters or afternoon crash. Head over to everydaydose.com/trips for 25% off plus 5 free gifts with your first order.
Your first month, you get a USB rechargeable frother, which is amazing. I can speak from experience. You get a gunmetal dose spoon, breathwork app by Othership, wellness booklet, and a sticker. Every month after, you get amazing free gifts with your order.
If you haven't used your sticker yet, my kids want it. Go to everydaydose.com/trips for 25% off plus 5 free gifts with your first order.
Here we go.
You moved to New York when you were 6, am I correct?
Yes.
thereabouts. And so prior to that, you were just traveling around wherever your parents were performing and working, yeah?
Absolutely. I learned about the world through the eyes of the theater and the creative arts and didn't know much. There were certain clues that we were kind of colorblind growing up. We were in Germany and, a man came to the door to deliver groceries and he was as black as my boots. And I had never seen someone that dark. And my brother and I started screaming, and we answered the door because, when you're 4 or 5 years old, you want to do everything. You want to be grown. And so we answered the door and all my mother and father heard were Schwarzer, Schwarzer, Schwarzer. so we literally ran into a closet. My mother was kind of freaked out and came to the door, got the groceries and realized, oh, they don't really see that I'm darker than Giovanni. They don't, but this man at the door was African. So as I understand, he was really kind of a blue-black color. And so to us, he looked like a ghost. But that's when she realized she had to really start to figure out how to speak to us about people of the world, thinking already that we were worldly because we had been around, but didn't really understand this man who was at the door, the accent and everything else. But yeah, I had a very different kind of upbringing. My bubble was burst when I came to America.
It is so funny.
America.
Your mom, I understand your mom being from Alabama and she has kids who've been in like Copenhagen, Rome, Hamburg. And it must have been so jarring for her to be like, are you telling me they're not worldly? Like, what do I have to do? And when you say America opened your eyes, I worry and I'm afraid to ask, but I'm assuming for the worse.
It was a discovery for me. We're talking 62, 63. And so that period of time in America, I think there was a certain tension between blacks and whites in certain parts of the country. And I felt shielded from that as I grew up in the theater. It gave me an identity that didn't have to identify with any color because I felt like I was the best of both worlds. That's what I was taught. And so I didn't understand when people just looked at me and had a judgment just based on the color of my skin. And so that was the difficult hurdle to try to find out how to embody all of who I am without any apology, and not feel like I wasn't acceptable. And so it was a tricky balance to find. And I think I finally achieved finding it through my work.
Was the move back to New York because your parents were planning on having a life in the theater in New York?
Absolutely. My father joined the union and he experienced, a certain other kind of racism because it was all Irish. And so he was an Italian and trying to join the Irish clan, which was the union in the theater. And so he felt like he was always struggling against being looked at as if he had the skill to do what he does. I've recently unearthed some photos of him behind a lighting board in Italy and realized, wasn't only a carpenter and flyman and property man for Hello Dolly in New York with Carol Channing and that championship season, that show he worked on, but he was also a lighting man. And that takes some skill to be able to light a production from a small lighting board and change that atmospheric lighting feeling as the opera or the show went on. And I don't know if he ever achieved that because in the union here, you had to come up as a carpenter. You had to come up and as he would say to me, you have to shape up. You have to shape up and earn it. And I think it took him a long time to feel comfortable in the union here. And he was a bit of a curmudgeon and he spoke up for his rights. And so I think he became, after a while, ostracized. I remember at one point, he was working at a theater downtown, a few blocks from the Orpheum Theater. And I said, what are you doing? He said, I have to shape up to get back into the union because I was put on leave. And he was putting putting the movie sign on the marquee, which were big red letters that you clipped in and on a ladder. And so they gave him the grunt work to do to be able to work himself back into being back on Broadway again. But he loved the theater, and his passion for it, certainly was passed on to me.
Did your mom still have family in Alabama, and was that a place you'd take trips back to?
Well, she did. She had my grandmother, Bertha Foster Price, lived in Alabama, and my mother basically abandoned us. I mean, it's the truth of the matter. She, at one point in those 4 years, when she brought us over, she dropped us with Bertha, and then she went back to Europe with my dad because we were a lot. As little boys, and she thought, let me just put him with my mom, and so we were there for a few years in Cleveland, Ohio, with Grandma, which was an interesting experience all in itself because my grandmother played organ and piano in the Baptist church, and she would always get tight with the ministers, so she had an inside track to God and other things. So it was coming to Cleveland and going to church with Pentecostal holy rollers was like a movie every Sunday morning.
Yeah.
Catching the Spirit, speaking in tongues, shaking and screaming for the Lord. It was something that shaped my childhood in a very different way from that moment forward.
Did you have immediate buy-in to that movie? Were you a fan of that movie, or did you and your brother fight it at all?
I was a fan of it. I don't think my brother was such a fan. I always felt a connection to another spirit or guiding force inside my heart and soul. So much so that, when my mom abandoned us the second time.
How old were you the first time?
The first time I was 4.
Okay.
3 or 4.
And your brother was how old?
My brother was a year older.
Okay.
So he was 5. And that she left us there for about a year and a half. She came back after a sudden illness that I had, that my grandmother had written her and said, baby's in the hospital. She never got that letter. She got the letter that said, surgery went well. Oh, wow. He survived. he lived, and he's back home. And my mother flew back. I had my grandmother cooked Southern cooking, and she knew that I loved to eat. I mean, I was born 13 pounds, so I had an affinity for food in the belly of my mom. And so she would cook cornbread and grits and all that heavy Southern food. And I had intercession of the bowels. And so after a couple of days, she noticed I didn't go to the bathroom. I wasn't pooping. And so she got concerned. And then a couple more days this is my grandmother, Bertha. A couple more days went by, and she was even more concerned. And then I started to turn colors like a little blue. And then she was really concerned. And so she took me to the hospital, and they knew what was happening immediately. First they said, and I'll never forget my mother telling me this, they told my grandmother, he's gonna be fine. He just had a little gas. Baby just got a little gas. He's all right. We're gonna shake him up. We're gonna pat him on the back. He's gonna fart. It's all gonna come out. It's gonna be good. And so a day and a half went by of that, and my grandmother saved my life. She walked into the hospital. She picked me up and swaddled me. She looked both ways down the hall, and she ran out of the hospital with me, took me to another hospital where they took me into emergency surgery. Turns out later the doctor, Ezant, never forget his name, who operated on me, had a glass eye. Thank God he didn't miss. And he opened me up, cleaned me out, and I was fine after that. And I think that kind of ended my mother and father's time in Europe. They thought, well, we should get back to the boys. Now, abandonment number 2. Leaving. So this was a little more complicated.
They found a way to abandon you again.
They found a way. The second time, we were just too much for my mom. I think it was after a road trip to the city with her. And we had a couple of very disastrous road trips. And so we lived in Westchester County. We were driving to the city. And we came to the city on this particular time. And my brother and I had got Christmas gifts of machine gun water guns. Now,
Okay.
you ever, all right? So you got a machine gun water gun that holds a whole lot of water.
Yeah, you can't. As a parent, don't let that go in the car.
Just, Seth, I'm going to tell you, don't do it. Don't do it because take your finger off the trigger. No, my brother and I, we had our time together and we're shooting each other with water guns. And my mother's trying to drive and she's being distracted and she reaches back over the seat and she grabs one of my water gun and she literally cocks it and smacks it and breaks it over my head. I was absolutely destroyed. I don't think it was as much pain as it was my water gun will never be again. And so I kept thinking about those moments that determine things and change your life. And it was after that she took us to Mount St. Joseph Military Academy and said, I need a break. She was working at Radio City. So now you got to understand this trajectory from opera diva to Radio City Music Hall, singing a solo alongside the Rockettes. There's a different world.
Yeah.
And she was providing for us. My mother and father were separating at that time, and she put us in military school. And I had to find, I'm trying to think about my life here in the theater. It's a life of escapism. I'm thinking about my life in military school. Where did I go? To the church. I became an altar boy. It's a life of I need to figure this out, how to find some solace within the situation. And so I became an altar boy and then learned about the priests and how they operate in the world, the clerical world backstage, which I learned about all too well.
So how many years were you in military school?
I was there for 3.5 years.
Got it.
Marching, learning how to shoot, following orders, being, how do I say it? Being reformed in a way. We had prefixes and we had priests, monks who taught us. And so, we had to operate as a group. And when that didn't happen, we were disciplined. And that discipline was inclusive of standing at attention for hours, getting your hands whipped on palms with birch branches until they were basically about to bleed, all those things that teach you to stay in line. So I learned a discipline. I also learned how to be a gentleman, table manners, learned how to put corners on my bed, learned how to be responsible, learned how to show up. So all that is the good news of it. Learned how to be a gentleman. That's what it taught me.
Did your brother get the same lessons from it? Was it as effective for him?
It was. It was. He learned how to dominate me. Because so I think his lessons were even far greater than mine. I mean, because he learned how to keep me in line as per his wishes, which was perfectly fine. He needed to feel that power, and it's like having kids. And I think having children, you want to keep them safe. I'm not sure my brother's, motive was to keep me completely safe. But I know for me and my children, why do you have to listen to me? And I think about the practical things. Don't cross that street because basically you'll get squashed like a bug. So maybe you should listen to me so I can help protect you. But then after a while, they get it and they can start protecting themselves.
Yeah. Now, 3.5 years of military school implies that you either started halfway through a year or you jumped ship with a half a year to go. So did you come in halfway through a season?
I came in at the beginning of the season and I jumped ship with half a year to go.
Okay. How did that go over?
There were circumstances behind that that were troubling. I was in the music department. So music was my place of solace, and being an altar boy was my place of solace as well. And I was in the music department with a young man named Carlos who decided that he wanted to play with some matches and play with fire while the window was open. He was consumed with it. And I was across the room and he lit up a handkerchief on fire. And I'm like, what the hell are you doing? And then he, when it got too hot for his hand, he threw it out the window. I said, what is happening right now? And so, of course, we were descended upon by staff and all that. And they accused us they accused me until I expressed the truth of the story, accused him of playing with fire and causing a hazard and trying to burn down the building. And of course, I stuck up for him. He wasn't trying to do that. He was just a little absorbed with the matches he had.
He just loves the sweet dance of flame.
That's right. He loves the sweet dance of flame. And so that was the end of my time there.
Really?
Wow.
That was it? That was
a handkerchief.
That was expellable.
It really, I didn't get expelled. It was an interesting process. They were so angry and upset that they made me sleep in the same single bed with my brother, with his head one way and feet this way, and my head one way and feet the other. And my mother came up, because of course they called her, and she was beside herself. She thought that was cruel and unjust punishment. And at that point in time, I just, my brother's BO in the bed was way too much for me. And I wanted out. And so we moved on from there.
Your brother did he leave too?
He left as well.
I will say, if anybody got an unfair punishment here, don't take this the wrong way, it was your brother, who was nowhere near a handkerchief on fire, and then all of a sudden gets you in his bed.
I agree. I think I soured the water for him as well. Yeah. It's really funny because I've been back to Mount St. Joseph Military Academy in Newburgh, New York, and it's turned into a home, a nursing home for old nuns, for retired nuns. And I had to go back just to see this place that was so a very powerful part of my life and my upbringing. And in the end, after all of that happened there, I feel like it was a good thing for me. I really do. It changed my life for the better.
I think a lot of people would assume, maybe, although you're in the music program, so maybe I'm leaning into an unfair stereotype that military school would maybe beat the arts out of you. But obviously you're brother and you leave, and that's still your future. Like what you're born into, that family overrides 3.5 years of military school.
Absolutely. And I'm always surprised when I hear about well-known artists who've been to military school. I've met a number of them. Al Roker went to the same military school I did. Joe Morton did 10 years earlier than me.
Oh, wow.
Francis Ford Coppola, who I just worked with and was at the premiere of Megalopolis here in New York last night, went to New York Military Academy down the road from Mount St. Joseph Military Academy. So I'm always and I didn't know this until last night that Francis had gone to military academy too. So many artists have gone to a military school. I've just started to talk about my experiences because, that's what happened. And, I'm writing a memoir and I have an editor I'm working with, and he asked me about my childhood, and I was like, oh, wait, I got to do the Seth Meyers podcast. And I didn't even know we were set up to do this when I saw you last week.
Yeah, I know.
And I went
backstage.
I know, it's so weird. And then I went, oh, what am I going to talk about? So my editor is like, did you have any fun times when you were a kid? Was it all doom and gloom? And I said, look at me, look how happy I am. But, because the instinct sometimes is to make up something that's not. Yeah. And although as a boy going through some of these traumatic experiences with my family, I realized that that's what happened. And, when I'm able to say what happened, I'm able to work through it in an everyday fashion in a much more seamless and easier way.
Yeah. And so when your mother wasn't working, if she had time off, would you guys take any trips? Do you recall any run-of-the-mill vacations?
I do. We went to Bloomington, Indiana, and we went to a horse farm there, which was like I loved animals, and I've always been intrigued with Westerns when I was a boy. But the road trips were arduous because after a while, when you're, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years old, and you're hearing La Traviata, how many times can you listen to La Boheme? How many times can you listen to, you know what I mean? How many times can you listen to Traviata?
So so not only they were opera people, but they made you listen to it all the time.
It's in the car all the time, and it was like, oh my God.
I gotta be honest. There were probably horse farms closer than Bloomington, Indiana. It does seem like a
I'm,
weird.
I'm sure there were, but this horse farm was special because it had wild white horses. So,
Okay.
so we get there and you're going to go to a horse farm to ride some wild horses at like 7 years old. Like, how does that work? You're going to tame the,
Fair question.
So, yeah, it's a very good question.
Well, you sounded like wild kids, so they probably thought this was,
My mother
game
would go,
recognized game.
Yeah, that's right. Johnny, she'd call him Johnny. Johnny, these boys are too much. Johnny, you have to come over here. Johnny, it's too much. This is after they were together when we went to this horse farm. So they put me on one of these wild horses, which was actually fairly tame, but it didn't want me on its back. So, and we're in a corral going around and around, and I lost my seating and I lost my grip, and I was off that horse by the third or fourth time around. It's funny when a horse trots, you gotta, use your inner thighs to keep yourself buckled down in that horse. They don't put a seatbelt on you, baby.
Yeah.
So I went off the horse and landed on the white fence and then landed on the ground. A bit of a disaster. The good news was I didn't break my back and I was okay. But I felt like I ruined the vacation, which is how a kid would feel, like I messed it all up. I'm still recovering.
And now we're going to take a quick break to hear from one of our sponsors. Support comes from Delete Me. Hey, Bashi.
Yeah, Sufi.
Have you or someone you know been a victim of identity theft, harassed, stalked, doxxed? Has that happened to someone you know?
It hasn't happened to anyone I know specifically, but anyone you hear about it happening to says it's maybe the worst thing that's ever happened to them.
I think it's a huge drag when someone takes your identity, because they almost never do something with your identity that you would like them to do. No one has ever steals your identity and then takes tap lessons and then tap.
That would be amazing.
That would be amazing.
Yeah.
And you know what? But again, that's not what they're doing.
No.
And that's why I personally recommend choose Delete Me. Delete Me is a subscription service that removes your personal info from hundreds of data brokers. These are the data brokers that are making a profit off your data. Your data is a commodity. Anyone on the web can buy your private details, and then that leads to the identity theft, where people are all of a sudden using your information for nefarious means.
Shame on them.
So that's why I sign up. Provide Delete Me with exactly what information you want deleted, and their experts take it from there. Take control of your data, keep your private life private by signing up for Delete Me now at a special discount for our listeners. Today, get 20% off your Delete Me plan when you go to joindeleteme.com/trips and use promo code TRIPS at checkout. The only way to get 20% off is go to joindeleteme.com/trips and enter code TRIPS at checkouts. That's joindeleteme.com/trips, code. Tell them, Pashi.
Trips. I really feel like you almost deleted me from that whole ad.
Yeah. I just kind of, sometimes I'm just rolling, Posh. And you're just, you know what? You know what you are?
Expendable?
An anchor.
Here we go.
So your mom called your dad. Your dad was Giovanni. She called him Johnny. What did she call you? What was her, did she shorten your name at all?
No, she called me Giancarlo. Or Giancarlo, because sometimes she didn't roll her R, sometimes she did.
Was there a difference? Were you in trouble with one and not the other? Or?
Oh, Giancarlo! Then I was in trouble. If it was sung, I was in trouble.
Oh, that's great.
Without a doubt. Yeah. It took me many years to pronounce my name properly because I came to America and my name is Esposito, right? We had Tony and Phil and everyone knew Esposito. And it wasn't for years that I realized that my name was Esposito when I went to Italy the first time and then I went back with my father. But I was afraid to say it because I felt like, okay, I'm an actor, creative person. If I say Esposito, that sounds a little affected. Yeah. And I don't want to be, I want to be real and not affected. And then I realized I was skirting my true identity. And the pronunciation of my name is really as it should be, Esposito. So I started saying it years ago. I had done Jay Leno, and I think I pronounced it, my full name, Giancarlo Giuseppe Alessandro Esposito. And that's kind of music. So I pronounced it correctly and I've been saying it correctly ever since, but code switching when I need it.
Yeah.
Like when I was, if people if I judged that they wouldn't understand me saying Esposito, I would say Esposito. Oh,
Yeah.
Esposito. Or if I say Esposito, they go, oh, it's Esposito. No, it's
Yeah.
Esposito. Now I insist. And recently I was watching the Olympics, and Manila Esposito, great gymnast from Italy, they won their first medals, and I was so very proud to be able to
Share the
congratulate her.
Esposito name.
Share the Esposito name. So I get a call from Anthony Anderson. And it's a message, a voice message. And it's just interesting people who they don't leave their voice message. They record one and send it to you. Hey, brother, where you at? Hey, man, look, have we been pronouncing your name? Wait, let me just explain. We're watching the Olympics. Me and my lovely watching the Olympics. And there's this girl, Manila. How do you say that? Manila. Well, you know what I mean. Call me. So, I love Anthony Anderson. That was his message to me. So I called him immediately. Brother, we've been pronouncing your name wrong. I said, yes, Anthony, my name is Giancarlo Esposito. That's it. That's what I was talking. Esposito. Man, I'm so sorry. When you're in LA, let's have some dinner and let's talk about your origins. And it was a wonderful call. It was a wonderful call. It was a wonderful call to get. I'm very proud of who I have become in accepting who I am.
Oh, that's just
great.
wonderful. Would you guys, living in Westchester, would you drive in to see shows? Would your parents take you as kids to see Broadway?
Yes. Yes, I saw Hello Dolly, that championship season when I was a kid, because my father worked on those shows. I saw Pippin, is where I first, got to know Ben Vereen. I saw Hair, and then I started making my own trips in to do theater. I've done 13 Broadway musicals. So the trip in was always a bit of a navigation, because there always was the car going to start. Would I get to the theater on time? Is everything going to go smoothly? And then it turned into, Giancarlo, would you drive? Because my brother and I would always argue about who's going to turn the car around. Like, it was that simple. And we wanted to get in. And so we'd alternate. We'd come in 7 North Lawrence Avenue facing down a hill that was a dead end. And we'd go down to the end of the street, turn the car around and park it and get ready for my mother to come out and take us to the theater. And my brother did 2 shows, Maggie Flynn, Jack Cassidy, Shirley Jones, and which is where we both started. Stephanie Mills, Irene Escalara, Irene Cara, David Lindsay. We were 9 years old now. 9 years old.
Wow.
And so my brother did The Great White Hope with James Earl Jones, who I absolutely adored. I met him the first time then, and then did a play later on in my life called, what did I do with him? I did, well, I'll get it in just a second, because I'm still back in this story of Broadway.
Yeah.
Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, I did with Jimmy later.
Oh, my goodness.
And then my brother dropped out, and I kept going. And so there was always the driving thing. And I remember, and driving from Westchester at that time took an hour, where now it's a little less time. The Sawmill's that's never been redone, but 287. This is right before 287 was really built all the way, right? This is going back, and don't check me, don't fact check me, I could be lying. Okay, so I remember my mother one day saying, I don't want to drive, will you drive? And I was so excited, I'm going to drive all the way to New York to the theater, and we had to get off the highway at 125th Street because it was backed up. And I had to come down the streets. And so we had to go through Harlem. And in Harlem on Lenox Avenue and the major avenues, you can turn both ways to make a left or make a right. And I remember turning, and I turned, and my rear end hit another car that was turning the other way. And we were on the car. My rear left door was on the car's rear right fender. And I was 13 years old, and my mother just turned and looked at me. And it was one of those looks like, what are you going to do? What are you going to do now? And I
you
looked
were
at
driving,
her.
you were 13 years old?
Yeah. She let me drive all the way to the city.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, she
Please
trusted
continue.
me. I'm a good driver. I was a good driver then.
Sure. You sound like you're great.
Tell it to the police. Tell it to the police.
Well, yeah, that was what was going through my head when I'm on this car. I put it in reverse. I hit the gas, backed off of him, made a wider turn, and kept on going, baby.
Wow.
And got myself to the theater on time, a little bit shaken, a little nervous. shook it off, felt badly, guilt. I'm a Catholic, former altar boy. You know what I mean? I'm like, I was going to become a priest, and that ended my priesthood days or my thoughts of being a priest because I did something really horrible, but I had to because I'd never get a license. And worse than that, I would be late for call time, and you can't be late. The show must go on, and I'd be docked money when you're late. Back then, they docked you if you can't be late. And now I get to the theater for a 7:00 show. I get there at 4:30 in the afternoon. It changed my idea of being on time and the responsibility it takes to be in the theater. But I started my journey from that age. I did 13 Broadway musicals, one after the other, and it just has been a thrilling ride. I love the theater, and it's something I'll return to very soon.
Were your parents delighted and proud by the fact that you sort of found your way to the theater and the world that they had first met in?
Yes, my mother was dedicated to training my voice, so I did musicals to begin with. And so it was great to have her guidance in the vocality of how to be able to sustain, 8 shows a week. And that was something that took, timing and energy, and you had to meter yourself out so you didn't blow your voice on a matinee and not have the voice for the evening performance. So my mother was very, very proud that I moved into musical comedy. My father was proud as well. His story is a little different about how he viewed my progress because he lived on 46th Street in Manhattan in the theater district, and he could go to any show for free because he could walk right in. And there's something called second acting, which is, if you don't have a lot of money, he happened to know everybody, so he would just walk in at the second act after intermission. Everyone's on the sidewalk. You just walk back in with them, and you just find an empty seat or you stand in the back. Yeah, a little clue there in case, you want to see a second act of a show and you haven't been able to get tickets for the first act. People leave, people don't stay, people get sick, people, haven't shown up. So he would second act the shows, and I wouldn't even know he was there until the stagehands who really liked me, because I love the backstage rhythm of what happens. Now, I come up in a time where you would wench a whole setting on from the wings. Whole living room set would be on a platform, be on rollers, and they would wench it. And so these very big men would wench this thing right out. And all those guys really liked me because I was interested in what they did. Like, it wasn't just grunt work. They allowed and helped facilitate all of this happening. And so they would tell me, your father was here. I was like, what? He didn't stop and say hello. He didn't come back afterwards. And, he would attribute, my success to my mother's training. He'd be very deferential to her and say, she did it all. But I took that as him being proud of me.
That's really nice. Both of our parents think they did it all. They both want they both want full credit.
And you got to give them credit, because had I not been exposed to their lives, I wouldn't have been inspired to have my life.
Yeah.
And I think for me, it was a great inspiration, but I finally wanted my real life. And I looked around and saw the time and tide of the 60s and how Black folks were the entertainment. And I realized that although it took a lot of talent to do what I did, that I wanted to further my talents. And I made a very, very strong decision. And that was to learn how to act. The singing came naturally. I learned how to dance. Michael Bennett taught me how to dance in a show called Two for the Seesaw. He was the second director to come in. He and Grover Dale and Nita Morris, they taught me how to dance for that show. So movement and singing felt like second nature to me, but acting was something new to learn. And I decided to become a dramatic actor. And the reason was because I wanted a world that deepened my craft outside of just Broadway, outside of just New York. And I felt a calling to it. And so I started to take acting lessons in earnest, and I sought to do a straight dramatic production. And when I did my first dramatic production of a play at the Negro Ensemble Company under the direction of Douglas Turner Ward, Zoo Man and the Sign, it changed my life. I put my head down. I learned this character. Mary Alice was in it. Carl Gordon was in it. And it was written by Charles Fuller, who was a Pulitzer Prize winner for A Soldier's Story. And I put my head down, and after opening night, I was plastered on in the theater section of the New York Times and the New York Post and the Daily News with a great stellar reviews for my performance and the play. And I eventually went on to win the Obie Award and the Theater World Award, and that solidified my confidence that I could be a dramatic actor and that I could affect people on a deeper level than just being what I prescribe to as being the entertainment, the laugh, the fun, the dance. But I could then really move people from one place to another in their emotions. And that was the beginning of my interest in film and in television and in straight drama.
That's fantastic. Before I forget, did you ever go back to Europe? You mentioned going with your dad. Did you ever go back with your mom? Was that ever something she wanted to do later in life?
You know, I felt like she had that desire, but she sadly never got over her not making it as a diva soprano. And I think, what happened for her was, if I can't be the best, I won't be at all. Mm-hmm. And so that's a different kind of love and adoration that you need to continue. There was a time in my career, Seth, where I went, all right, I think it was after Carbon Copy between me and Denzel Washington, and George Segal star, and I didn't get that movie. Like, well, it may have been between me and Denzel and 5 other actors, but as far as I was concerned, it was between me and Dean.
Yeah, it was. You were number 2. You were the second choice for sure. Yeah,
and I didn't get that, and I went, okay, what does this do to you? Like, that was my moment to be a star, and I knew I could do that role. And they told me I was a little too young, and Denzel had a little more depth, and he was a little older, a little more experienced. Okay, great. And so I asked myself, will you stay in this if stardom and celebrity is never part of the equation? And I knew I would. I knew it didn't matter. I knew if I had to do regional theater or Broadway for the rest of my life, I would do it because I loved it. And it wasn't about the fame, fortune, or stardom. So once I gave up the idea of any of that, then I started to realize, what the small rises and steps to stardom was. I've had all these different rises to stardom, and now I kind of giggle and laugh because I'm a lifer. Like, now it doesn't matter. You know what I mean? I'm in it, whatever. And now the material is what really moves me more than anything, and the process. And I think it's part of that little boy's journey to exercise all the demons that he accepted as true from people who said your life's going to be like this or like that or the other. And it's the understanding that I have a choice in what I choose. And if I choose quality and I choose the dedication to doing something real for a purpose, for a reason, then I'll be fulfilled.
I want to ask about a location you worked for a long time, because it's where my family takes a trip every year. My wife is from about a half hour north of Albuquerque. Did you enjoy your time in New Mexico? I know it stretched over many years.
It did. I enjoyed my time in New Mexico greatly. It was interesting to be in a cast of folks who came in during the week and went back to LA on the weekend. Yeah. And I came in for Breaking Bad, and I would do 5-6 day stretches and leave. Stay in a hotel. They'd put my episodes together. And there was something about the city I immediately fell in love with. It felt easier. It felt at a different pace. It felt real. It felt like ordinary people to me than how I felt in New York, Chicago, or LA. And so I did that for a number of years and then went back for Better Call Saul and quickly realized that I didn't really want to just stay in hotels. That would be way too much. So I bought a little cottage that I could be in and didn't know why I bought it. I bought it I walked in with my youngest daughter, who's now 20, took a selfie at the door, which I'll never forget, and sent furniture and furnished it with some mid-century modern furniture, and never was there again for one whole year.
Wow.
And I thought, because my girl said, Papa, don't you want a home of your own? When you come to our house, you sleep in my bed or my sister's bed, or you sleep in the basement, and you're always on the road. Don't you want a home of your own? So I finally did it. So after that year went by, I went, why did I buy this house? It's just so stupid. I'm a nomad.
Yeah.
I don't need it. And then pandemic hit. And I went, now I understand. And so that taught me to be alone. I didn't know how to be alone. All my kids called my dear manager Josh and said he's not gonna make it. It's not gonna be COVID that he gets him. He ain't gonna make it. The guy just can't be alone. And I planted a garden, grew a beard, read a book, cultivated a podcast, cultivated 2 different projects that I've finally got to the screen, my own show, Parish for AMC, worked on that, did the Broken and the Bad wraparounds with one of my daughters, but largely learned how to be within myself.
Well, I'm just happy to know you have a place because when we stay with my in-laws and when they start driving me crazy, I'm going to call you and say, did you leave the keys under the mat?
I can hook you up because I have a beautiful place that feels like not only home, but it feels like solitude. Where are your people from? An hour north, because I go
They're
up
at
that
Placitas. Placitas is a little town between Santa Fe and Albuquerque.
Yes, it's a little small town.
Small little town. Yeah.
Not much is there.
Not much is there. I would say when I'm there for a week, we go to the like science museum like 4 days. I just have to get my kids. So, but it's good. I would say that's the thing about Albuquerque that's amazing is if you live in New York, if you live in LA, Chicago, like you mentioned, like you go to the Albuquerque Zoo, which is a great zoo, you just like park at the door. Like it's just amazing how convenient it is to be in one of those like sort of middle level cities.
Well, I have to tell you, the Explorer Museum in Albuquerque is one of my favorites.
The best. Love it.
It's the best. I still have a video of my third child, who's now 23, when she was 9, making that little film with the blocks at the Explorer Museum. It's a very, very, very special place, and Albuquerque has become that for me. It feels quiet and reserved and lovely.
So did you spend most of the pandemic out there?
I sure did.
Wow.
I sure did. I grew tomatoes and lavender. I grew string beans, artichokes, squash. I had a most incredible garden.
Wow.
And it was fun to be there during that time. Look, for me, I made a phone call. Pandemic hit, I made a phone call. I called the accountant. I said, okay, I'm a divorced father of 4 and taking care of everything. 4 cars, girls in college, all of that. How long can I last? He said, it's like calling the doctor. You got about a year. Maybe. If you're frugal, you got a year. And so I went, okay.
He's like, make your own squash. Can you grow your own squash?
That's right. And then he said, you have to sell it too.
Yeah.
And I started to think about Edison and Henry Ford, like, great men who went bankrupt more than once. And I had already been bankrupt once and 1.5 times. Yeah, I know. How does that half work? I know James asked that question. Well, what about that half? Yeah. And I realized I had to go to work.
Yeah.
Like, this is the time for me to work. You can rest, get to know yourself, but it's time to develop. I developed a show called Parish for AMC. I developed the idea of writing this memoir, which I'm deep into now. I developed the idea for a podcast and did 2 installments of it to get some attention and have some folks who'd like to do it. As you guys know, it's time consuming, thought provoking. You have to give a lot of attention to it. And I all of a sudden has been working like a madman again. But all of these things that I did during that pandemic are paying off for me now. One of the things is to change my attitude and have my attitude be of one of success and know that the time I put in now is going to display and show itself tomorrow.
Oh, fantastic. This has been just a terrific conversation. No surprise. It's always such a delight to see you and talk to you. But before you go, Josh is now going to ask you the questions we ask all of our guests.
All right, some quick questions here. You can only pick one of these. Is your ideal vacation relaxing, adventurous, or educational?
Adventurous.
Yeah,
Very good. What is your favorite means of transportation? Train, plane, automobile, boat, bike, walking, etc.
Motorcycle.
Whoa!
Ooh.
Look at this guy.
I don't know if we've gotten a motorcycle yet.
So the Esposito comes out.
There you go, baby. Ducati all the way, baby.
If you could take a vacation with any family, alive or dead, real or fictional, other than your own family, who would you like to take a family vacation with?
Bryan Cranston's family.
All right.
Excellent.
All right.
If you had to be stranded on a desert island with one member of your family, who would it be?
My youngest daughter, Ruby.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, great. The youngest, man. They're the only one you can give where everybody's like, all right, fine.
Well, she's hope for the future. The others are too far gone.
Yeah, okay, good.
Your hometown would be Westchester, New York, I'm guessing?
That's correct.
All right.
Elmsford, New York.
Elmsford. Would you recommend Elmsford as a vacation destination?
Absolutely. Go to King Pizza and do nothing.
Okay. It's a short vacation.
Or you could be there as long as you want. I mean, that sounds very restful.
Yeah.
And Seth has our final questions.
Have you been to the Grand Canyon?
I have not.
Do you want to go?
Desperately.
Okay. Well,
Lovely.
feel
We
like
just
you kind
went.
of blew it. All those years you were in New Mexico, I feel like that's what
I
you
know.
should
I
have
went
done
to
it.
Sedona, and
Okay.
my eldest daughter went to the Grand Canyon, told me all about it. I'm so jealous. Well, you know what? I'm going to amend my answer. I have been. I flew over it in a plane.
Nope.
And boy, did I
We don't
see
count it. Get out of here.
Too bad. Okay. All right. I tried. I really tried.
This was the best. Thank you so much. I can't wait to see Megalopolis and just hope to see you in person soon.
I hope so too. And look out for Captain America 4, Brave New World. I play a character
Welcome.
you've never seen me play before.
Welcome
in
to
that.
the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I'm
Thank
very
you so
excited
much
for that edition.
You have been lovely, both of you. This has been a
thank you.
great experience. All my anxiety melted away in the first 3 minutes, and I just adore both of you. Thank you.
you so much.
Thank you. All right,
My
we'll talk to you
pleasure.
soon. Thanks,
Have a
Giancarlo.
great
Okay.
one. Bye now.
Bye.
Family trips with my brothers.